The door closed behind me with that soft, final click that meant rejection. 15 interviews. 15 polite smiles followed by the same rehearsed lines about exploring other candidates, or finding someone who better fits our current needs. I walked across the parking lot of Danny's Auto Parts, my shoes scraping against the cracked asphalt. The manager had been nice enough about it, I guess. He'd even bothered to flip through my application before his expression changed. That little checkbox next to "Have you ever been convicted of a felony?" might as well have been a scarlet letter branded across my forehead. The bus ride back to my apartment took 40 minutes, giving me plenty of time to count and recount the cash in my wallet. $83. Rent was due in 2 weeks, and that was assuming I could stretch my grocery budget to cover ramen noodles and whatever was on clearance at the corner market. Detroit looked different when you were broke and desperate. The abandoned buildings seemed more numerous, the potholes deeper, the whole city carrying this weight that pressed down on everything. I'd grown up here, but prison had a way of making familiar places feel foreign. Or maybe I was the one who felt foreign now. My apartment building sat on a street where half the houses had boarded windows and the other half probably should have. The lobby smelled like old cigarettes and industrial cleaning solution. Mrs. Chen from 2B was checking her mail when I walked in, and she gave me that look I was getting used to. Not unfriendly exactly, but careful. Like I might suddenly remember I was supposed to be dangerous. I climbed the stairs to the 3rd floor, my keys jangling in the quiet hallway. Inside my studio apartment, everything looked exactly as I'd left it that morning. The single bed pushed against one wall, the card table I used for eating, the mini fridge humming in the corner. Not much, but it was mine, and I was determined to keep it that way. My phone buzzed. Michael Thompson's name appeared on the screen. "James, can you come in tomorrow, say 10 in the morning?" "Yeah, sure." "Good. We need to talk about how things are going." He hung up before I could ask what that meant, though I already knew. The job search wasn't exactly going well, and parole officers had ways of keeping track of these things. The next morning, I took the bus downtown to the parole office on Woodward Avenue. The building was one of those government structures that looked like it had been designed by someone who thought beige was too exciting. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, while people sat in plastic chairs, waiting for their names to be called. Michael's office was on the 2nd floor, tucked between a water cooler and a bulletin board covered in job postings that were either outdated or required skills I didn't have. He was sitting behind his metal desk when I knocked on the open door, my file spread out in front of him like evidence at a trial. "Come in, James. Close the door." I settled into the chair across from his desk. Michael was one of those guys who looked like he'd been doing this job for decades, with gray hair and reading glasses that he wore pushed down his nose. He wasn't exactly warm, but he wasn't cruel either, just professional. "How's the job search going?" "Not great." He nodded like he'd expected that answer. 15 applications in the past month. No offers. "That's right. You know what the problem is." I did know. We both knew. The conviction followed me everywhere, a permanent shadow that employers could see from across the room. "There's a company that sometimes hires people in your situation," Michael said, pulling a business card from his desk drawer. Laughs. "I don't know much about what they do, but they've been known to give people second chances." He handed me the card. It was plain white with simple black text. No logo, no fancy design, just a name and a phone number. "What kind of work?" "I honestly don't know. Some kind of filing or data entry, I think. But James, you need something soon. Your reintegration report is due next month, and having steady employment is going to be important. I tucked the card into my jacket pocket. I'll call them. Good. And James, don't give up. I know it's hard right now, but things will get better. I wanted to believe him, but 15 rejections had a way of wearing down optimism. Still, I nodded and stood up to leave. The ride home gave me time to think about what Michael had said. Things will get better. Easy for him to say. He had a job, a pension, probably a house in the suburbs with a garage and a lawnmower. He'd never had to explain a felony conviction to a potential boss or count change to see if he could afford both groceries and laundry detergent. Back in my apartment, I pulled out the business card and stared at the phone number. Part of me wanted to call right away, but another part was afraid of adding rejection number 16 to my growing collection. I set the card on my card table and made myself a peanut butter sandwich for lunch. The afternoon dragged by. I cleaned my apartment, which took about 20 minutes since there wasn't much to clean. I watched some television, flipping through channels until everything started to blur together. I thought about calling the number on the card, but every time I picked up my phone, I found an excuse to put it down again. Evening came, and I still hadn't made the call. I was lying on my bed, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds of the building around me. Someone upstairs was walking around in heavy boots. A dog was barking somewhere down the hall. Normal sounds of people living normal lives. Around 9 o'clock, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my door. Nothing unusual about that, except these footsteps stopped right outside my apartment. I waited for the sound of a key in a lock, or voices, or someone continuing down the hall. Instead, there was silence. After a few minutes, I heard something slide under my door. I got up and walked over to look. A black envelope lay on the linoleum floor, thick paper that felt expensive when I picked it up. No postmark, no return address, nothing written on the outside at all. Inside was a single sheet of paper with text printed in simple black letters. Position available 2847 Riverside Drive, Southwest Detroit, Friday, 2 a.m. Bring identification. That was it. No company name, no job description, no contact information. Nothing about pay or benefits or what kind of work was involved. Just an address and a time. I checked the envelope again, looking for any clue about where it had come from or who had delivered it. The paper felt different somehow. Heavier than normal stationery, with a texture that was almost silky under my fingers. Friday was tomorrow night, or technically, early Saturday morning. Who conducted job interviews at 2 in the morning? And how had they gotten my address? I hadn't applied to any company that would send unmarked letters to my apartment. I sat down at my card table and spread the letter out in front of me. The address was in Southwest Detroit, an industrial area where most of the buildings were warehouses or manufacturing plants. Not exactly the kind of place you'd expect to find an office, especially one that was open in the middle of the night. But what choice did I have? $83 wasn't going to last much longer, and my next meeting with Michael was in 2 weeks. If I didn't have a job by then, things were going to get complicated fast. I picked up the business card Michael had given me earlier and compared it to the letter. LAF's. No connection I could see, but the timing was strange. My parole officer mentions a company that hires people with records, and a few hours later, I get a mysterious job offer delivered to my door. The smart thing would probably be to ignore the letter. Normal jobs didn't come with mysterious envelopes and middle-of-the-night interviews. But normal jobs also didn't hire people with felony convictions, and I was running out of options. I folded the letter and slipped it back into the envelope. Tomorrow night, I'd find out what kind of company conducted business at 2 in the morning. Or I'd discover that someone was playing an elaborate joke on the desperate ex-con in apartment 3C. Either way, I was going to show up. Hope and dread felt pretty much the same when you were broke and running out of time. I stepped off the bus 2 blocks from the address, checking my phone for the time. 1:55 a.m. The industrial section of southwest Detroit looked different at night, all empty parking lots and dark windows. Street lamps created pools of orange light every few hundred feet, but most of the area stayed swallowed in shadow. The building at 2847 Riverside Drive looked exactly like what I'd expected, another abandoned warehouse in a city full of them. Brick walls stained with decades of weather. Windows either boarded up or broken out entirely. A chain-link fence surrounded most of the property, though sections had been cut or pulled down over the years. Nothing about it suggested anyone conducted business here, let alone job interviews in the middle of the night. I walked around the perimeter, looking for some sign of life. No cars in the parking lot, no lights visible anywhere. The whole place felt empty, forgotten. Maybe this was some kind of joke after all. Stand around in an industrial wasteland at 2 in the morning and see how long the desperate ex-con would wait. "James Martinez?" The voice came from somewhere behind me. I turned around and saw a man step out from between 2 parked trailers. He was tall, maybe 6'3", wearing a black suit that looked expensive even in the dim light. His hair was dark and cut short, and something about the way he moved reminded me of the corrections officers back in prison. Controlled, purposeful. "Yeah, that's me. Robert Clark. Follow me." He didn't wait for a response, just walked toward the warehouse. I followed him along the building's side wall until we reached what looked like a solid brick section. Clark pressed his hand against a particular spot, and part of the wall swung inward like a door. The false wall was maybe 3 feet wide, perfectly disguised from the outside. Behind it was a small room with metallic walls and an elevator door. Clark pressed the call button and stepped back. The elevator arrived with barely a whisper of sound. 5 people stood inside, all wearing identical black suits. None of them looked at me when I entered. None of them looked at each other. They stood perfectly still, hands at their sides, eyes focused straight ahead like they were mannequins arranged for a window display. Clark stepped in behind me and pressed a button marked with the letter B. The doors closed. The elevator moved down and kept moving. I counted seconds, trying to estimate how far we were descending. 30 seconds. 45. A full minute passed before I felt the slight deceleration. That meant we were stopping. When the doors opened, I found myself looking at a modern office space that could have belonged to any downtown corporate building. Bright fluorescent lighting, gray carpet, white walls lined with motivational posters. The contrast with the abandoned warehouse above was so complete it felt like stepping into a different world. The 5 people in suits filed out silently and disappeared down a hallway to the left. Clark gestured for me to go right, toward a reception area where a woman sat behind a polished wooden desk. She was maybe 50 years old, with neat brown hair and wearing a navy blue business suit. When she saw me approaching, her face lit up with the kind of professional smile I remembered from bank branches and doctors' offices. "You must be James. I'm Sarah Bennett." She stood up and extended her hand. "Thank you so much for coming in tonight. I know the timing is unusual." Her handshake was firm and warm. Everything about her seemed normal, friendly even. Nothing like what I'd expected after the mysterious letter and the hidden elevator. "Please sit down." She gestured to a chair positioned in front of her desk. "Can I get you some coffee? Water?" "I'm fine, thanks." Sarah settled back into her chair and opened a manila folder. "I'm sure you have questions about LFs. and what we do here? A few, yeah. We're a filing and document management company. Nothing too exciting, I'm afraid, but very necessary work. We handle sensitive documents for various clients, which is why our security measures are rather extensive. That explained the hidden entrance and underground location, I supposed. What kind of work would I be doing? Simple retrieval tasks. We have a large storage facility here, and sometimes our clients need specific files located and delivered to designated areas. You'd receive a list of file numbers, find them in storage, and bring them to the appropriate locations. Very straightforward. And the pay? $15 an hour to start, with the possibility of increases based on performance. Most shifts are 4 to 6 hours, typically during overnight hours, when our clients prefer to conduct their business. 15 an hour was more than I'd hoped for, especially for something that sounded like basic manual labor. When would I start? Tonight, actually, if you're interested. We'll have you sign some paperwork and then run through a quick training session. Sarah opened her desk drawer and pulled out a contract. This covers the basics: confidentiality agreements, safety protocols, that sort of thing. She handed me a pen along with the contract. The pen felt strange in my hand, heavier than normal and cold, like it had been sitting in a refrigerator. The metal was silver, but looked almost black under the office lights. I scanned through the contract quickly. Standard employment language mostly. Confidentiality clauses about not discussing client information or company procedures. A section about following all safety guidelines and reporting any unusual incidents immediately. The pay scale matched what Sarah had mentioned. I signed my name at the bottom, using the unusual pen. The ink came out silver instead of black, which seemed odd, but the signature looked clear enough. Perfect. Sarah took the contract and pen back, filing the paperwork in her desk. Now let me show you the storage area. She led me across the office to a door marked File Storage in simple black letters. Next to the door was a clipboard hanging from a metal chain. Each assignment will have a file number listed here. She pointed to the clipboard, which currently had a single entry, FS4471B. You'd locate that file in storage and bring it to the designated pickup location. Usually, that's just back here at my desk, but sometimes there are other delivery points. Sarah opened the storage door. Beyond it stretched a room that looked impossibly large, filled with metal shelving units that reached up toward a ceiling I couldn't see in the darkness above. Rows and rows of shelves extended in every direction, each one packed with manila folders and document boxes. Take your time getting familiar with the layout, Sarah said, handing me the clipboard. The files are organized numerically, so FS4471B should be in the 4000 section. Any questions? How big is this place? Oh, quite extensive. Some new employees get a bit turned around at first, but you'll get the hang of it quickly. Just remember to stay in the main aisles. Some of the back sections are still being organized. I nodded and stepped into the storage room. Behind me, I heard Sarah close the door with a soft click. The space felt even larger once I was inside it alone. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, but they seemed dimmer here than in the office, casting everything in a pale, clinical glow. The air smelled like old paper and metal, with an underlying chemical scent I couldn't identify. I started walking down the main aisle, looking for section markers or some kind of organization system. The shelves were labeled, but not in any pattern I could immediately understand. I passed sections marked with combinations of letters and numbers: DT 2000s, BR 1500s, FS 3000s. The FS 4000 section was about 5 minutes walk from the entrance. I found FS 4471B on a shelf at eye level, a thick manila folder stuffed with documents. Nothing unusual about it, just another file among thousands. I pulled it from the shelf and was about to head back toward the door when something caught my eye on the shelf below. Another manila folder, but this one had a white label attached to the front. The label had my name on it. James Martinez. Below my name was a photo. My photo, the same one from my driver's license. And below that, printed in small black letters, Employee, or a 4471B. I stared at the label for several seconds, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. Then I looked inside the folder. The body was curled up on the shelf like someone had tried to stuff it into a filing cabinet. The clothes were exactly the same as what I was wearing. Dark jeans, gray t-shirt, brown jacket. The face was mine, or had been mine before decay had started to set in. Skin gray and peeling, eyes clouded over, mouth hanging open in what might have been a scream. The smell hit me then, sweet and rotten and completely wrong for a clean office building. I dropped the file I'd been carrying and stumbled backward, my shoulder hitting the shelf behind me hard enough to rattle the metal frame. The corpse wore a name tag pinned to its jacket. The same photo, the same name. James Martinez, employee door 4471B. I stood there in the fluorescent light, looking at my own dead body, while somewhere in the distance I could hear the soft hum of office equipment and the sound of my own breathing getting faster and faster. I stumbled backward until my shoulder slammed into the shelf behind me, then spun around and ran. My feet pounded against the concrete floor as I weaved between the towering shelves, not caring about direction or navigation, just getting away from that thing that looked like me. The fluorescent lights blurred overhead as I sprinted toward where I thought the entrance might be. My chest burned by the time I burst through the storage room door and found myself back in the reception area. Sarah looked up from her desk with that same professional smile, as if nothing had happened. How did it go? Did you find FS 4471B? I bent over, hands on my knees, trying to catch my breath. There's something in there, on the shelves. Something? A body. A dead body that looks exactly like me. Sarah's expression shifted to one of gentle concern, the kind doctors used when delivering bad news to patients. She stood up and walked around her desk, stopping a few feet away from me. James, I should have warned you about this. New employees sometimes experience visual disturbances in the storage room. It's the combination of the lighting and our specialized air circulation system. Completely harmless, but it can cause some pretty vivid hallucinations. Hallucinations. Oh yes, quite common. The filtration system we use to preserve the documents creates an atmospheric pressure that some people are sensitive to. Add the fluorescent lighting at that particular frequency, and it can play tricks on your mind. She returned to her desk and pulled out another assignment sheet. It'll pass once you get used to the environment, but it looked so real. They always do. That's what makes them hallucinations rather than just tricks of light. Sarah handed me the new assignment. I'm putting you down for Monday night, same time. The disorientation should be much less noticeable on your second visit. I stared at the paper. File number DS2290A. I don't know if I should come back. Of course you should. $15 an hour, remember? And I have a feeling you need this job more than most people. Her smile remained warm, but something in her tone suggested she knew exactly how much money I had left in my wallet. The bus ride home gave me plenty of time to think about what had happened. Maybe Sarah was right. Maybe the stress of job hunting and the weird underground environment had gotten to me. Prison had taught me that minds could play tricks when you were under pressure, and I'd been under plenty of pressure lately. By Sunday, I'd almost convinced myself that's all it was. Almost. But $15 an hour was $15 an hour, and my rent wasn't going to pay itself. Monday night found me back at the warehouse following the same routine. Robert Clark met me at the hidden entrance. We rode down in the elevator with the silent people in suits, and Sarah greeted me with her professional warmth. "Feeling better tonight?" "Yeah, I think so." "Wonderful. Same process as before. Check the assignment board, find the file, bring it back here." The storage room felt smaller somehow when I entered it the second time. Maybe I was getting used to the scale, or maybe knowing what to expect made it less overwhelming. The fluorescent lights still hummed overhead, and the air still carried that chemical smell. But nothing seemed as alien as it had during my first visit. File DS2290A was located in the second section, about 3 minutes walk from the entrance. I found it easily enough, a standard manila folder tucked between dozens of others. As I pulled it from the shelf, something made me glance at the row below. My own head sat on the shelf like a paperweight, eyes wide open and staring directly at me. Not attached to a body this time, just the head, neck ending in a ragged mess of torn flesh and vertebrae. The mouth was moving slightly, as if trying to speak, but no sound came out. I dropped the file and backed away so fast I nearly tripped over my own feet. My hands shook as I pressed them against my mouth to keep from screaming. But when I forced myself to look again, there was nothing there except a box of paper clips and a stapler. Office supplies. Normal, boring office supplies. I picked up the file I'd dropped and walked quickly back to Sarah's desk, not looking at any of the shelves on the way. "Everything all right? You look a bit pale." "I'm fine." "Good. Same time Wednesday." I nodded and left without saying anything else. Wednesday came and went without incident. I found the assigned file, delivered it to Sarah's desk, and went home with $60 in my pocket. Maybe the second time really had been my imagination running wild. Friday night was different. The assignment was simple enough. Locate file BR8844C and deliver it to the front desk area of the storage room, not back to Sarah's reception desk. A minor change in procedure, but nothing complicated. I found BR8844C exactly where it should have been, in the BR8000 section. A thick folder, heavier than most. I carried it through the aisles to the front of the storage room, where a small desk sat near the entrance door. I set the file down on the desk surface and turned around to head back out. The file was gone. I checked the floor, thinking maybe it had fallen. Nothing there. I looked under the desk, behind it, around the nearby shelves. The file had simply vanished. Back in the BR8000 section, file BR8844C sat exactly where I'd found it originally, as if I'd never touched it. I pulled it from the shelf again and walked back to the front desk, this time watching it carefully the entire way. I placed it down gently, making sure it was centered on the desk surface. Then I turned around, counted to 3, and looked back. Empty desk. In the BR8000 section, the file waited for me on its shelf. Third time, I tried a different approach. I carried the file to the front desk but didn't set it down. Instead, I held it in my hands while turning around to look back at the shelves. When I faced the desk again, my hands were empty. The file was nowhere to be seen. BR8844C sat on its original shelf, waiting. I stood in the middle of the storage room, staring at a file that refused to stay where I put it, in a place that was starting to feel less like a filing system and more like some kind of elaborate trap. "Having trouble with your assignment?" Sarah's voice came from right behind me. I spun around to find her standing there with that same pleasant smile, as if materializing in the middle of a storage room at 3 in the morning was perfectly normal. "The file keeps going back to the shelf." "Oh, that happens sometimes with the newer organizational system. There's a bit of a learning curve." She walked past me toward the front desk area. "Let me show you the proper procedure." I followed her, though I noticed she didn't actually retrieve the file from its shelf. She simply stood at the front desk and gestured to the empty surface. You just place it right here, like you've been doing. Sometimes there's a brief delay in the processing, but the system sorts it out eventually. But the file disappears. Processing lag, she said, as if that explained everything. Nothing to worry about. I'm going to bump your pay up to $17 an hour, by the way. You're proving to be quite reliable. $2 extra an hour. That was an additional $8 per shift, enough to make a real difference in my weekly budget. I appreciate that. Of course, it can be difficult to find good employment with certain backgrounds, can't it? Criminal records make employers so nervous these days. Such a shame when people make mistakes in their youth and spend years paying for them. The way she said it made my skin crawl, though I couldn't pinpoint exactly why. Maybe it was the tone, too understanding and sympathetic, like she was talking about someone else's problems rather than acknowledging mine. I'll see you Monday night? Yeah, Monday night. I left through the same elevator, past the same silent people in suits, through the same hidden entrance in the warehouse wall. During the bus ride home, I tried to convince myself that whatever was happening in that storage room had reasonable explanations. Hallucinations from the air system, stress reactions from starting a new job, some kind of filing procedure I didn't understand yet. But $17 an hour was $17 an hour, and Sarah was right about one thing. People with criminal records didn't have the luxury of being picky about their work environments, even when those environments made absolutely no sense. I slid my ID card through the time clock next to Sarah's desk, knowing it would be the last time I'd ever do it. The decision had crystallized over the weekend while I sat in my apartment, counting the money I'd earned from LFs and trying to make sense of what I'd experienced in that storage room. $17 an hour was good money, better than anything else I was likely to find, but no amount of cash was worth whatever was happening down here. Sarah handed me the clipboard with tonight's assignment, file GR7763D. Her smile seemed brighter than usual, almost pleased about something. Another busy night ahead, she said. This particular file is quite important to one of our key clients. I nodded and took the clipboard, not bothering with small talk. After tonight, I'd tell her I was done, find some excuse about a family emergency or a conflict with my parole requirements. Whatever it took to walk away clean. The storage room felt familiar now, almost routine. I knew which aisles led where, could navigate between the sections without getting turned around. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead with that same mechanical consistency, and the chemical smell in the air had become something I barely noticed anymore. Just another workplace environment, if you ignored the impossible scale and the things that occasionally appeared on the shelves. Section GR7000 was located toward the back of the storage area, maybe 8 minutes walk from the entrance. I'd been there once before, last Wednesday, when I'd retrieved a file without any incidents. Normal filing cabinet work, exactly what Sarah had described during my first night. The shelves stretched up into darkness above me as I walked down the main aisle. Thousands of manila folders and document boxes lined the metal frames, organized in their mysterious system that somehow made perfect sense once you got used to it. I passed the sections I recognized, DS2000s, BR8000s, FS4000s, where I'd seen my own corpse that first night. Just hallucinations, according to Sarah. Side effects of the air filtration system. I found GR7763D exactly where it should be, tucked between two other thick folders on a shelf at chest height. Nothing unusual about it, just another manila folder stuffed with papers. I pulled it from its spot and checked the label to make sure I had the right number. Something moved between the shelves to my left. I turned toward the sound and saw a figure step out from behind one of the metal frames about 20 feet away. The shape looked familiar, though it took my brain a few seconds to process what I was seeing. It was me. Same height, same build, same brown jacket and dark jeans I was wearing. But blood streamed down from both eyes like tears, leaving dark stains on the shirt underneath the jacket. The face was mine exactly. Same features, same stubble, same scar on the chin from when I'd fallen off my bike as a kid. The bleeding version of myself walked closer, moving with my exact gait and posture. When he spoke, the voice was identical to mine, down to the slight Detroit accent I'd picked up over the years. "You need to stop looking for that file." I took a step backward, bumping into the shelf behind me. The folder slipped from my hands and fell to the concrete floor with a soft thud. "What are you?" "I'm you, or I was you, depending on how you want to think about it." The blood continued flowing from his eyes, but he didn't seem bothered by it. "James Martinez, employee number 7763D. Sound familiar?" The file number, GR7763D. My hands felt cold as I stared at this thing that looked exactly like me. "The filing system isn't what Sarah told you," the bleeding version continued. "This place exists in multiple dimensions at the same time. Every assignment they give you creates another version of yourself, trapped in the same loop, forever. Looking for files, delivering files, getting paid $17 an hour until something goes wrong and you end up like me. You're not real. You're another hallucination from the air system." He laughed, and it sounded exactly like my laugh. That's what I told myself too the first time I met one of the other versions. There are dozens of us down here, James. All trapped in different sections, all running the same assignments over and over. The entities that live in the walls feed off our confusion and fear. I bent down and picked up the file I'd dropped, holding it against my chest like some kind of protection. "Entities? You can hear them sometimes, scratching inside the walls. They've been here longer than LF's, longer than this building. Sarah Bennett isn't human. She's something that wears human form to lure people into working here. People who won't be missed if they disappear. The corpse you saw your first night, that was James Martinez too, employee number 4471B. He tried to quit after 3 weeks. They found him in the parking lot of his apartment building. Heart attack at 30 years old. No family, no close friends, just another ex-con who died alone. So they recruited you to replace him." My throat felt dry. "Replace him?" "They target people who match the physical appearance of previous employees. Makes the transition easier, keeps the filing system organized. You look exactly like 4471B, which is why they had your address, your parole information, everything they needed to get you down here." The bleeding version of myself moved closer, close enough that I could see the blood was real, not some kind of makeup or special effect. It dripped steadily onto his shirt and the concrete floor below. "Everyone who tries to quit ends up dead within a week. Car accidents, heart attacks, random muggings that go wrong. LAFs has ways of making sure their employees stay employed." "Then how are you still here?" "Because I never left the building. I've been hiding in the back sections for 6 months, staying away from the main aisles where the entities hunt. But you can't live like that forever." The fluorescent lights flickered above us, casting moving shadows between the shelves. In the distance, I could hear something scratching against metal, a rhythmic sound like fingernails dragging across steel. "There's a way out," the bleeding version said. "A maintenance exit that leads to street level. But we have to go now before they notice we're talking." I looked down at the file in my hands. GR7763D. My employee number, according to this other version of myself. "What happens if I don't deliver this?" "They'll send someone to find you. Sarah will come looking, or maybe Robert Clark. And once they find you..." He gestured to the blood streaming from his eyes. "This is what happens when you try to run within the building. The entities mark you. Make sure you can't hide for long." The scratching sounds were getting closer, coming from multiple directions now. Whatever lived in the walls had noticed our conversation. "Follow me," the bleeding version said. "Stay quiet, and don't look back at anything you might see in the side aisles. Some of the other employees have been here much longer than me." He turned and walked quickly toward the back of the storage area, moving between towering shelves that seemed to stretch endlessly in all directions. I followed him, still carrying the file I was supposed to deliver, wondering if I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life or if I'd already made that mistake the night I first walked into this place. I followed the bleeding version of myself deeper into the storage facility, clutching the file GR7763D against my chest, like it might somehow protect me from whatever was happening here. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered more frequently now, casting erratic shadows between the metal shelving units that stretched up into darkness above us. "This way," he whispered, moving quickly between towering stacks of files and document boxes. "Stay close and don't make any noise." The scratching sounds from within the walls grew louder as we moved away from the main aisles. Metallic scraping noises echoed around us, coming from multiple directions at once, as if something with claws was moving through hidden passages behind the shelving. The chemical smell in the air became stronger too, mixed with something else I couldn't identify but made my stomach turn. My doppelganger led me through sections I'd never seen before, past rows labeled with combinations like XR9000s and QT12000s. The organizational system seemed to continue infinitely in all directions, defying any logical layout for an underground storage facility. We walked for what felt like 20 minutes, though the consistent fluorescent lighting made it impossible to judge time accurately. "Don't look to your left," he whispered as we passed between two particularly tall shelving units. I looked anyway. A body in a LAF's uniform hung upside down from one of the upper shelves, arms dangling toward the floor. The name tag was too far away to read, but the corpse looked fresh, maybe a day or two old. Blood had pooled on the concrete beneath it. "I told you not to look." "How many people work here?" "Worked here. Past tense for most of them." He kept moving, navigating through the maze with practiced familiarity. LAFs goes through a lot of employees. High turnover rate. We passed another body slumped against a file cabinet, this one in advanced decay with gray skin peeling away from bone. The uniform was identical to mine, down to the cheap plastic name tag. Employee number 3322F, according to the label clipped to his shirt pocket. The scratching sounds intensified as we walked deeper into the facility. Whatever lived in the walls was tracking our movement, following us through hidden passages that ran parallel to the storage aisles. I could hear multiple sets of claws now, scraping against metal and concrete with rhythmic precision. How much further? We're almost there, just past section ZZ-15,000. ZZ-15,000. I'd been working here for over a week and had never seen anything beyond the GR sections. The scope of this place defied physics, extending far beyond what could reasonably fit beneath a Detroit warehouse. My doppelganger stopped suddenly and held up his hand for silence. The scratching sounds had ceased, leaving only the distant hum of fluorescent lights and the quiet whisper of air circulation. Blood continued streaming from his eyes, dripping steadily onto the concrete floor. "They're listening," he whispered, barely audible. "Walk on your toes for the next 50 feet." I followed his instructions, moving as quietly as possible between shelves packed with files and document boxes. More bodies appeared as we progressed, some hanging from upper shelves, others sprawled between storage units, all wearing identical LAF's uniforms in various stages of decay. The newest corpse I saw looked like it had died within hours, while others had been reduced to little more than bones and fabric. "Here," my doppelganger said, stopping in front of a section labeled ZZ 1 Fiend 847. The shelving looked identical to everything else we'd passed, packed with manila folders and storage boxes arranged in perfect order. He reached up and pulled on a specific file folder about halfway up the shelf. Instead of sliding out like a normal folder, it triggered something mechanical. A 3-foot section of the wall behind the shelving swung inward with a quiet click, revealing a small chamber beyond. "Maintenance elevator," he explained. "The entities don't use this one because it's too old and slow for them to bother with." The elevator looked ancient, compared to the modern one I'd used to enter the facility. Rust stained the metal walls, and the control panel contained only a single button with no label. The lighting inside came from a single bare bulb that cast harsh shadows in the cramped space. "Where does it go?" "Street level. You'll come out in an alley about 3 blocks from the warehouse where you first entered." He gestured for me to get inside. "Push the button and wait. It takes about 5 minutes to reach the surface." I stepped into the maintenance elevator and turned back toward him. "What about you?" "I can't leave. The marking prevents me from going more than 50 feet from the building." He touched the blood streaming from his eyes. "This is what keeps me bound to the storage facility." "Then what's the point of showing me the way out?" "Because maybe you can actually escape. Maybe the entities haven't marked you yet." He smiled, and it looked exactly like my smile except for the blood. "Someone should get away from this place." The scratching sounds resumed, closer now, coming from directly above us. Something was moving through the ceiling space, tracking our location with increasing accuracy. "Go," my doppelganger said. "Push the button now." I pressed the unmarked button, and the elevator doors began closing with mechanical slowness. Through the narrowing gap, I could see my doppelganger backing away from the hidden entrance, blood still flowing from his eyes like dark tears. The elevator rose with jerky, uneven movement, nothing like the smooth ascent of the modern elevator. Ancient machinery groaned and clicked around me as we climbed toward street level. The single bulb flickered occasionally, threatening to leave me in complete darkness. After what felt like much longer than 5 minutes, the elevator shuddered to a stop and the doors opened. Cool night air hit my face, carrying the familiar smells of Detroit, exhaust fumes, garbage, and the distant scent of the river. I stepped out into a narrow alley lined with dumpsters and fire escapes, surrounded by the normal sounds of a city at night. I turned back toward the elevator to see if my doppelganger had followed, but found only empty air. The elevator, the doors, even the entrance itself had vanished completely. Just a blank brick wall between 2 buildings, with no sign that anything had ever been there. My hands were empty too. The file GR7763D had disappeared sometime during the elevator ride, leaving no evidence of my time in the underground storage facility. I walked to the mouth of the alley and looked around, trying to get my bearings. 3 blocks away, exactly as promised, I could see the familiar outline of the warehouse at 2847 Riverside Drive. Just another abandoned building in an industrial district, showing no signs of the impossible facility that existed beneath it. "Good luck." The voice came from right behind me. I spun around and saw my doppelganger standing there, blood still streaming from his eyes, wearing that same sad smile. But even as I watched, his form began dissolving like smoke, becoming translucent, and then fading away entirely, until nothing remained except the empty alley and the sound of distant traffic. I stood alone in the early morning darkness, 3 blocks from LF's, and completely free of whatever had been happening in that underground maze. I sat on my bed for hours after getting back to my apartment, staring at the wall and trying to process what had happened in that underground facility. The bleeding version of myself, the corpses in LF's uniforms, the impossible scale of the storage room that couldn't exist beneath a Detroit warehouse. Sleep came in fragments between 4 and 8 in the morning, filled with dreams of fluorescent lights and endless shelves. When I finally got up, my first instinct was to find out what LAFS actually was. No company operated the way I'd experienced without leaving some kind of digital footprint. I walked to the public library on Cass Avenue and used one of their computers to search for LAFS. Nothing appeared in Google results except a few acronyms for unrelated organizations: Legal Aid Family Services, Louisiana Association of Fire Scientists, stuff that had nothing to do with document storage or underground facilities. I tried searching for the address at 2847 Riverside Drive and found property records showing the warehouse had been abandoned since 2018, owned by a shell company that led to another shell company that led to a dead end. Sarah Bennett's name produced no relevant results either. No LinkedIn profile, no professional associations, no social media presence. For someone who ran a document management business, she had managed to avoid creating any online evidence of her existence. I spent 3 hours searching different combinations of terms: underground storage Detroit, mysterious filing company, late-night office work. The closest thing I found was a conspiracy theory forum where someone claimed to have worked for a company that operated beneath the city, but the post was 2 years old and full of details that sounded made up. Walking back to my apartment, I considered reporting LAFS to the police. The rational part of my brain said that's what normal people did when they encountered something illegal or dangerous, but the practical part knew exactly how that conversation would go. A recently released felon claiming he'd discovered a secret underground facility where multiple versions of himself were trapped in some kind of supernatural filing system. They'd assume I was having a mental health crisis or trying to get attention. Even if I convinced them to investigate the warehouse, what would they find? An abandoned building with no evidence of the hidden entrance Robert Clark had used. No elevator, no underground office, no bodies in LAFS uniforms. Just empty concrete and broken windows. My criminal record meant I couldn't afford to sound crazy or waste police time. One phone call to Michael Thompson would confirm that his client was showing signs of instability, possibly struggling with reintegration stress. The smart thing was to stay quiet and hope LAFS forgot about me. 3 days passed without any contact from the company. I spent Tuesday job hunting again, filling out applications at places I'd already been rejected from, hoping they might have forgotten about my felony conviction since last week. No luck there either, but at least the rejections felt normal compared to whatever had happened in that storage facility. Wednesday, I cleaned my apartment thoroughly, trying to establish some kind of routine that didn't involve mysterious envelopes or underground elevators. Thursday, I watched television and counted my money. $247 now, thanks to the LF's paychecks. Enough to last another month if I stayed careful about expenses. Friday afternoon, my phone rang. Unknown number with a Detroit area code. I almost didn't answer, but unemployment meant I couldn't ignore potential job opportunities. "Hello, James." Sarah Bennett's voice came through the speaker with that same professional warmth I remembered from the underground office. Calm, friendly, like she was calling to schedule a routine appointment. "How did you get this number?" "We have all your contact information on file, naturally. I'm calling because your employment status with LFs requires clarification." I walked to my window and looked down at the street below, checking for black cars or anyone who might be watching the building. Everything looked normal. Parked vehicles, a few pedestrians, Mrs. Chen from 2B walking her small dog. I quit. I'm not coming back. I'm afraid that's not how employment with LAFS functions. Our employees aren't permitted to quit without completing proper exit procedures. What exit procedures? A comprehensive debriefing process that typically takes several months to complete. Your unauthorized departure on Monday evening has been noted in your file as a violation of company policy. The way she said Noted in your file made my stomach tighten. File number GR7763D, according to the bleeding version of myself. My employee number in whatever system LFs use to organize people. I don't care about company policy. I'm done working there. Sarah's laugh was soft and understanding, like a teacher dealing with a confused student. James, you have to understand that LAFs has invested significant resources in your training and orientation. We expect a reasonable return on that investment. You paid me $17 an hour to find files in a storage room. What investment? Security clearance processing, background verification, specialized facility access. These things cost money. And employees who leave prematurely create financial losses for the company. I moved away from the window and sat on my bed, trying to keep my voice steady. Send me a bill. I'll pay you back for whatever you think I owe. Payment isn't the issue. The issue is that you have knowledge of our operations now, which creates certain obligations on your part. Sarah was right that I knew things about their operations, though I still didn't understand what those things meant. What kind of obligations? Continued employment, naturally, along with discretion regarding anything you might have seen during your orientation period. And if I refuse? Sarah's tone remained pleasant and professional, but something colder moved underneath it. I hope that won't be necessary. Though I should mention that we have your current address, your parole officer's contact information, and detailed records of your daily routine over the past several weeks. My hands felt cold again. You've been watching me? LAFs takes employee security very seriously. We monitor all our workers to ensure their safety and well-being. I haven't seen anyone following me. Our surveillance methods are quite sophisticated. For instance, I know you visited the library on Cass Avenue Tuesday morning and spent approximately 3 hours using their computers. I know you applied for work at Danny's Auto Parts again on Wednesday, even though they already rejected you 2 weeks ago. I know Mrs. Chen in apartment 2B walks her dog every Friday at 3:15 p.m., and you often watch from your window. I looked at the window again, wondering where cameras or microphones might be hidden. The building across the street had dozens of windows that could conceal observation equipment. Or maybe they had access to traffic cameras, security systems, cell phone data. What do you want? Simply for you to return to work. You were an excellent employee during your orientation period, and we'd hate to lose someone with your potential. And if I don't return? Everyone eventually comes back to work, James, whether by choice or by force. Some employees require more encouragement than others, but we always reach an understanding eventually. The line went quiet for several seconds. I could hear her breathing on the other end, patient and calm, waiting for my response. I won't come back. Of course you will. A car will pick you up Monday morning at 1:30 a.m. for your next assignment. Please be ready and waiting outside your building. I won't be here Monday. Where will you go? Bus tickets require identification, which we can track. Hotels require credit cards or cash deposits, both of which create records. Your parole restrictions limit how far you can travel without permission. And of course, any attempt to leave the Detroit area without notifying your parole officer would violate the terms of your release. She was right about all of it. My options for running were limited by money, documentation, and legal restrictions. Even if I managed to leave the city, LAFs had demonstrated resources and capabilities I didn't understand. I could report you to the police. Sarah laughed again, genuinely amused this time. A recently released felon claiming he discovered a secret underground facility where supernatural entities trap employees in an endless filing system. I'm sure they'd take that very seriously. The call ended with a soft click, leaving me holding the phone and staring at the silent speaker.
No goodbye, no final threats, just the assumption that our conversation had settled everything.
I set the phone on my bedside table and started pulling clothes from the small dresser where I kept my belongings. 3 shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, underwear, and socks. Everything I owned fit into a single duffel bag I'd bought at Goodwill after getting out of prison. $247 would buy a bus ticket to somewhere far from Detroit, maybe Chicago or Cleveland. I could find work under a different name, stay off official records, disappear into whatever underground economy existed for people who couldn't afford to be found. But as I packed my clothes, I knew Sarah was right about something else too. LAFS would find me eventually, no matter where I went. They'd shown capabilities that didn't make sense for a normal company, and resources that suggested connections I couldn't understand. Still, running was better than waiting for Monday morning at 1:30 a.m. Better than getting into whatever car they sent and returning to that storage facility where multiple versions of myself were already dead or dying. I zipped up the duffel bag and counted my money one more time, enough to disappear for a while, even if I couldn't disappear forever.